let's talk about a couple of moves that Top Rank made this week. They have taken the Shakur Stevenson pot of money and disseminated it to other fighters, beginning with Jaime Munguia, who they have signed to a new deal. You reported on that this week. And also Junto Nakatani, the 118-pound title holder who is marching his way onto pound-for-pound lists after some recent performances. Let's start with Munguia, because I've seen a lot of Jaime Munguia over the last 6 years. I think I've called every one of Jaime Munguia's fights over the last 6 years. Fun fighter, as we mentioned earlier, a better-than-expected performance against Canelo Alvarez. He's going to face Eric Bazinian on September 20th. That'll be in Glendale, Arizona. That's a decent fight. Bazinian's undefeated. He's ranked. Makes some sense for Munguia to come back after a loss to Canelo with that type of fight. But then it's about what's next, right? Because whether it's Jaime Munguia himself or the people around him, Fernando Beltran, who's been his co-promoter for a long time, Golden Boy, which was his promoter up until this point, they haven't been interested in real fights. When you look at his resume, it's B, C, and D level guys that he's fought. He's been incredibly active. I'll give him that. Like, he keeps fighting, but he's not fighting the guys that people want him to fight. Now, there's been some bad luck. He was probably going to fight Jermall Charlo if they could have made a deal happen a couple of years ago, but the resume is what it is. Like, he's got a whole lot of wins and not a lot, if any, that you would call high quality. So what do you make of this signing? Like, what does Top Rank do with this guy who's popular, television friendly, but just won't get in the ring with some of the guys we want to see him against?
Well, first off, Chris, I think it's a big loss for Golden Boy. I mean, I think they did a great job building him. I think they promoted his last 16 fights with 13 of those on DAZN, and he's become a genuine attraction. So I think that's great for Top Rank. Top Rank does really well with Mexican fighters. As far as the fights go, you're absolutely right. It's a very weak resume. He hasn't really fought anybody. And again, Top Rank has a bad habit of this, especially, I think, is marinating these fights. I believe it's a 3-fight deal. I know it's multi-fights with Top Rank. Let's see the damn Christian Mbilia Jaime Munguia fight. Not, down the road, but after this. Mbilia's fighting Derevianchenko on August 17th on ESPN. That, he fought Munguia on ESPN's Fight of the Year last year. After that, they're on the same schedule. Make the fight next, assuming there's no injuries and everything. I think Mbilia is a fantastic fighter. He's a great action fighter. And I think Mbilia Munguia is a can't-miss fight. And I also say, in addition to that, I think a big problem with the lack of competition in a lot of these matchups, Chris, is the 17 weight classes and 18 if you want to honor the Bridgerweight nonsense. It's too many weight classes, and it really affects the depth in each one. It's too much of, well, he can't fight, Boots Ennis, for example. He's at 47. Oh, he can't fight this guy, that guy. But what? Why can't he fight guys at 54? Why can't he fight a Virgil Ortiz or a Tim Tszyu?
Yeah, I agree with you on the number of weight classes. That's for sure. I would love to see Munguia against Mbili. Like, that's a real fight. Two guys ranked. Presumably they would be in the top 5 for most, if not all, of the sanctioning bodies out there. That could potentially be for a vacant title if Canelo ultimately decides to start letting some of these belts go in the next year. We know the IBF one. Something's going to happen with that probably sooner than later. So I like that fight. What I don't want to see, though, Mike, is like, you beat Bazinian, and he's going to beat Bazinian. Like, Bazinian can't punch. Like, Munguia is going to, I think he's going to run right through him. Don't talk to me about, like, Janabek moving up to 168 to fight Munguia. I don't want to see that. Like, that does nothing for me. It does nothing for Top Rank. It does nothing for ESPN. Like, you need to see him in with the top guys in his weight class. Let Janabek, if he's going to move up, fight somebody else, build himself up at this weight, and maybe down the line. But to me, it's Mbili or bust. I mean, would you agree? Like, does it have to be Mbili?
Yeah. I love Mbili. I mean, I think Mbili, I would favor Mbili over Munguia, actually.
Fun fighter,
and very strong, athletic, and he just comes forward and lets his hands go. And he makes good fights with everybody. And he's an attraction too. He's a genuine attraction in Quebec.
Yeah, I'd love to see that fight. He's an action fighter. Lets his hands go, like you said. So does Munguia. That's probably somebody getting knocked out in that fight. The other guy they signed was Nakatani, who we saw this past weekend on ESPN Plus picking up a first-round knockout, defending his 118-pound title. I thought this was a curious signing to a degree, Mike, because I don't know what's there for Nakatani stateside. I think his mandatory or number one contenders, is he a Mexican? Like, so I guess you could do a fight in Southern California with Nakatani, but all the other title holders are Japanese. And the big fight for Nakatani is one division up with the big dog in Japan, in a way. So what do you think the thinking was behind this signing for Top Rank?
I think Top Rank recognizes how talented Nakatani is. I mean, he's already number 9 on my personal pound for pound list. I think he's a fantastic talent, and I'm not so sure that Inoue would even beat him. I mean, I think that's a cool fight from what I see. Nakatani's big, strong, rangy. He can really punch too, and he has just a very high boxing IQ. I think Rudy Hernandez, his trainer, is doing a great job with him. But in terms of the stateside exposure, I think it would be wise to get some stateside exposure. I think the best way to be a big star is to have a foothold in 2 different areas, right? Like maybe you're fighting 3 times a year, ideally, fight twice in Japan and once in the US or vice versa. Obviously, Los Angeles has a huge Japanese population. You have Otani now on the Dodgers. I think it would be great if Nakatani was fighting, in Los Angeles. And you mentioned 118 is a little rough. Maybe bring him up to 122 and make a fight with a guy like a Akhmadaliev. I'd love to see that fight. Again, I would favor Nakatani for sure. But
do you risk that though? Like, do you risk it against a guy like Akhmadaliev when a fight with Inoue is such a mega event in Japan?
I don't think it's a risk. I think Nakatani is an elite talent.
I agree with you. I think Akhmadaliev is pretty good though too. Like if he was fighting TJ Doheny, like Inoue is, who I think Inoue is going to roll through in his next fight. Like I just think Akhmadaliev might represent too much risk against the pot of gold. I mean, God knows what those guys would make in Japan for, Nakatani versus Inoue. 8 figures each, probably. Like that's a big number. I know Inoue is making 8 figures anyway, but like, a big number for both those guys. I feel like you mentioned the marinating. Don't marinate that too long, man. Like let's get to the middle of next year at the latest and make that fight happen.
But I mean, again, I know that makes way more sense in Japan, but I would have to imagine if you did Inoue versus Nakatani in Los Angeles,
Vegas
or Vegas. I know a lot of people believe that Inoue could sell out Madison Square Garden right now.
You think?
I don't know. I mean, a lot of people I've talked to in the industry think so. I do think an Alexander Usyk can sell out the Garden tomorrow. I think people underestimate heavyweight champions in New York. I mean, we've seen Vladimir Klitschko do it a number of times.
He didn't though. Like I remember those. Like, who was it? Sultan Abragamov? Was that like a unification fight? It was in New York. It didn't do that well. Like that struggled.
Didn't the Brian Jennings fight do well though?
Brian Jennings fight did okay. Was that at the Garden though or Barclays? I can't remember.
That was at the Garden. That was at the Garden.
Okay. Like it was okay. Like and look, Vladimir tried to make himself a U.S. attraction. Vladimir, can't remember, he came to the Sports Illustrated offices a dozen times over the years, just popping in and looking to do interviews and looking to build his brand in the U.S. His problem was like nobody knew these opponents, right? Like Brian Jennings was probably the most known guy he fought, in 5 or 6 years fighting in the U.S. I would love to see Inoue Nakatani in Vegas because I think there's a lot of Japanese money that would come over and gamble. I think the casinos would love to have a fight like that, would probably pay a premium to have it at like the MGM Grand Garden Arena. Maybe you scale it to like the 14,000 you have for fights there and stay away maybe from T-Mobile. Can he sell out T-Mobile? I don't know. I think he could definitely sell out the Grand Garden Arena. So I'd be down for that. I don't want to wait, man. Like I get it in Japan. They're both big individual stars, but if you want to get U.S. interest, middle of next year, do a fight between those 2 guys, like, and see who the best is, see who wins that fight. And then maybe see where Bam Rodriguez is at that point. See what Bam's up to. What's happening with Bam at 115, 118? I don't know. So I think that's a huge fight.
That's right. Yeah, Bam. How can we forget him? Yeah, Bam and Nakatani. I think Bam is also a special fighter. I don't know who wins between Bam and Nakatani. The Nakatani's height and range is just uncanny, and the way he generates leverage on those punches too. So.
And I think his profile is going to grow even more this year because I do think they're going to find a way to make the rematch with Estrada before the end of the year. And I think the same thing's going to happen. Like, I don't think there's any adjustment Juan Francisco Estrada can make. And another knockout win over a legend will only help his stature in the boxing community. And then maybe you get that Puma Martinez fight. Maybe then you move up to 118. You start talking about round robin with these 3 guys because those are great fights, like the next generation of Chocolatito, Estrada, Sorung Basai and all those guys, like a little bit bigger, but very much as dominant. All right, last thing for you. We know that Lomachenko is out of the Tank Davis fight. His manager, Agus Klimas, announcing that he is going to take the rest of the year off, just a little bit burnt out, doesn't want to get back into it. And now that kind of leaves Tank out there looking for an opponent. I still think, Mike, that the front runner is Isaac Cruz if he wins this fight on August 3rd. There's history there. It's an easy fight to make in terms of who they're all both associated with. But, you've got Shakur out there as a free agent. And, you've seen some of the back and forth between members of Tank's team, members of Shakur's team. Both sides seem open to the fight. I mean, how realistic do you think it is that Shakur Stevenson is Tank Davis's opponent this fall?
I wouldn't count on it. I'm with you. I think we're going to see Tank move up to 140 and fight the winner of Pitbull Cruz and Jose Valenzuela. They're fighting August 3rd. I think if Valenzuela beats Cruz, I think we see him fight Tank.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, I don't see why not. They're fighting at 140. Valenzuela.
That's a take right there. That is a hot take. I love it. Valenzuela beats Cruz, you think?
No. I'm saying if he beats Cruz, Tank will fight him. Sorry. No.
Oh, I thought you were going to give me something scorching there, Mike. I thought you give me a sizzling hot upset.
No, but I think Valenzuela is live, though. I think
he can bang.
Fight.
Yeah.
Not like Pitbull Cruz is Canelo Alvarez, or some elite, talent. I'm picking Pitbull. But I think Tank gets the winner. It's funny. Tank Shakur, I don't have a ton of interest. I want to see it. I'm not dying to see it. But when I talk to a lot of athletes who are big boxing fans, that's all they talk about. It's like a lot of the NFL players I know that are boxing fans, is all they want to talk about is Shakur Stevenson and Gervonta Davis. Mm-hmm. Shakur just, I don't know. Shakur just doesn't move the needle for me in that regard, the way he's fought, but he's a very talented guy. I don't know. I don't get the sense that it's a major mega fight. Do you?
No, but I don't. I think the stars are kind of lining up right now to make it easy to make it happen, right? Like Shakur's not going to fight Zepeda next. There's no interest on Golden Boy's side in making that fight. They are hoping to get the WBO to order Baranchyk to fight him, and they can put Zepeda in with Baranchyk. And I think Zepeda beats Baranchyk, and then you go into 2025 with a belt, and all of a sudden these opportunities are a lot more lucrative. There's more money on the table. I don't know where that leaves Shakur Stevenson. I know Matchroom has been courting him, but what does Matchroom really have at 135 that might interest him? 140, yeah, they've got some players up there, but I think that kind of leaves Shakur in a weird place if they can't make the Tank fight happen.
I agree. I do think that the natural fight is the Tank Shakur fight. I want to see it. I'm just saying I don't think it's a mega fight yet, but I do want to see it, and I think it makes the most sense. I'm not getting the sense that there's like all this momentum toward making it happen. And from what I heard in Shakur's talks with Matchroom, they've been approached him by moving up to 140 if he goes to them. It makes sense, like you said. Catterall, pro grade winner. I think it's going to be Catterall. You have
Liam Paro's out there. Yeah.
Liam Paro. I think Paro, look, that guy can fight. And Matias is still out there as well. I don't want to count Matias out after one loss. Mm-hmm. So I think that'll make a lot of sense. If Shakur fights an aggressive guy like a Paro or Matias, he could be more exciting. I think he could. I don't think Top Rank did him any favors with some of this opposition.
Yeah, I think he needs to be in. Like, that's why I think a Zepeda fight would be so interesting next year, because even Shakur has admitted he's never fought anybody like that guy. Like, how do you match someone that throws 100 punches around with that kind of accuracy and power? Like, it's unique. And Shakur's gifted, and he's one of the best pound for pound fighters on the planet. But that is a unique challenge that he would have to face. So yeah, you and I are on the same page. Like, I think Tank and Cruz, if Cruz wins, is the most likely fight for the fall. Plus with Shakur, like that's a big guarantee, right? Like that's like, you're talking $12-15 million guarantee for both those guys. Like that's a huge number in today's day and age.
I think it's just it's very tough negotiation. And I think, you and I both know when it comes to that stuff, that a lot of times the promoters go with what's going to be a lot easier to make. Maybe they'll try a little bit. I think it's going to be a huge slog to try to make Shakur versus Tank. Neither guy's going to be all that realistic. And then on the Zepeda thing, look, I'm not so sure Shakur beats Zepeda. We know classically that style always has trouble with that, that Mexican pressure style. Just look at Jose Luis Castillo against Mayweather. I'm not saying Shakur's as good as Mayweather, but we know what can happen.
Yeah, and look, I ask every single fighter that comes into a William Zepeda fighter meeting, how do you counteract the pressure? And it's always blah, 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 blah. And it never works. Like, I've yet to see somebody do something that works. Now, Shakur would be better than anybody William Zepeda has faced. So there's the challenge. But, this guy is going to throw with accuracy. He's going to throw with power, and he is not going to stop throwing. So even if you have success in 1 or 2 rounds, you better be ready to have success for 10 more, because he's not going to stop. It's
And
just good.
he actually knows how to cut up the ring.
Yeah.
A skill that a lot of fighters don't have.
Yeah, he's got a good Panta Nahar, his trainer, like been with him since the very beginning, and they've got a chemistry that is rare in boxing. Like they've figured each other out and they know how to work together. And I think that's what makes part of what makes Zepeda a special fighter. That motor that is kind of driven by Panta Nahar and his training habits.